Hello and welcome to the AI Digest. My name is Joaquin Melara, and I'm with a senior moderator, expert TV personality, Scott Abel.
Hi
How you doing?
there. Good. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me today?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear
Awesome.
me?
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear. That means at least we've got half the problems out of the way, right? We got the technology gods are on our side.
At least we can hear each other. It doesn't guarantee we'll understand each other, but that's
Well,
a content
we'll work
problem.
on it.
So Scott, you are the CEO. Sorry, you're the founder of the Content Wrangler. Is that that's good?
Yeah.
You're an established expert in the field of content strategy and management, and you've been an avid advocator for content, technical documentation, and content operations.
Yeah, I've been trying to work with organizations to help them figure out how to best manage, create, manage, and deliver, really, the three big buckets. Create the content they need, manage it in an effective way, and then deliver it across the channels that their customers require it.
And you've always been championing your efforts around well-structured and effective technical documentation. But more importantly, it's really about making sure that you have exceptional customer experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think the end use of the content is the most important, and that is that we're creating that content for a reason, right? Most content, most content expenditures are viewed by leadership as an expense, right? Of course, any money out is an expense, but they're often viewed as a necessary evil expense. Like, oh, we have to, write some documentation. It's never like part of the product. I mean, never is not a true word anymore. There are a few companies that have started to have this aha moment that the documentation is the product, right? If you receive a product in the mail and you open it and it's not apparent how to operate it and the documentation is there, it is part of your product experience, right? You just open the box and for you to go, oh, it's so wonderful. The thing I bought works the way I want. You sometimes need to follow instructions. If those instructions are an afterthought, then of course it makes the enjoyment factor less and the success of your experience is probably going to be really low.
Yeah, I mean it's all about lubricating the customer to solve their problem. You don't want to put more barriers of entry for them to resolve a problem just getting your product to solve their problem. You want to make sure that it's one streamlined situation, one streamlined experience. Um, Look at Apple, for example.
Yeah.
They patented their boxes. Why? Because they've
Right.
designed the right amount of pressure and all.
Perfect experience. The perfect experience. I mean, I have had people actually stop me and say, behind my shelf, I have a shelf at another office, and there's a box. There's some boxes on it, and I happen to have a couple Apple product boxes. Do I keep boxes from every other company? Absolutely not. I have absolutely no other box collection, but I totally do have laptop, iPad, iPhone box, and they're on my shelf. And sometimes people see them and they're like, "Why do you have those?" I'm like, because this is a great example of a customer experience that works. When you unbox the package, it's uncomplicated, it is clean, it is nice, it is beautiful. It makes you feel confident that they are going to give you this beautiful experience. Now, if they didn't deliver and give you a great product and great ability to use that product, the box would just be pretty packaging, right? And it would be no different than getting a Christmas present that grandma wrapped really well, but that was not the present you wanted.
Just another pair of socks. Come on, Grandma.
You got it. Come on, grandma, step it up a notch.
Um, I mean, you said something insightful just in this introduction. It is part of the product.
Yeah, exactly.
It is part of the product. You're delivering not only something that encases the product so that it could be transported safely, but so that you know what's in there, so that people know how to use it, so that people know how to maintain it. They can maximize their value derived from engaging with it. And it doesn't even need to be an expensive investment. You said people are concerned about, we just need to comply with that regulatory rule here.
Yeah.
We just have to make sure we don't kill people there.
Right.
Yeah,
A legal department wants you to have documentation, right? But they don't really want you to have documentation. They want you to have protection against liability. That's it. So yeah, maybe it ends up in a document, but their concern is protection. The viewer or the receiver of that information may not understand any of the words that are written by the legal team. And so it will be hard for them to go to court and say that that person understood what they signed when it's written in all kinds of gibberish that makes no sense, right? So that's an old school documentation problem. I'm not minimizing it. I'm just trying to point out that what we talked about at first, the piece of paper that's in a box, right? That's the old school problem. That's the documentation. We think of that content as post-sale content. For example, you go to an automobile showroom, you engage with the salesperson, they want to tempt you, and their call to action is, wouldn't you like to drive that car? And then they give you the keys and they get in the car with you and they drive around, you do whatever, and then you decide maybe you're going to buy it. Only after you make that decision do they come to the car and the salesperson sits with you and opens the glove compartment and takes out a book that shows you how to use your car. And they'll review a few things first, you know, the flashy things that everybody wants to know about, how's the stereo work, blah, blah, blah. But the purpose of that was to give you something after they committed you to the sale. So you are a post-sale consumer. However, the internet changed all that. Now we publish content to the web, which means that before you buy a product, the documentation is actually playing a role in helping people decide whether they should buy something or not. And this seems counterintuitive to some people. They're like, wait a minute, that makes no sense. Why would I be reading the product manual for that product if I don't own it? I can tell you exactly why. If you're replacing a product, this is a great use case. I own a car today, but I want a new car tomorrow. But I know what I don't like about my current car. And I know I tried to fix that problem by calling their support or going to their website or using their app or whatever. And I know it wasn't a great experience because I remember the negativity, right? So now I think, hey, before I buy that new car, let's go to their website and see if their online help is as bad as the current car company that I use. See how now all of a sudden your content is a prospect-focused content. But that content is not written for them. That content isn't optimized for them. And yet Google is going to deliver that content to those consumers when they search more often than the marketing nonsense that these car companies are producing, because the car companies have to buy their way into Google, right? They have to pay to be at the top. But if you optimize your content for search and you're smart about it, Google sees that as more relevant. So when the question is, how do I, fix the car, something or other? How do I change a car tire? How about that? How do I change the tire on this such and such model car? And then you go to that website and it's way straightforward. There's a great video that shows you and it gives you confidence. Oh, I think I can fix the tire on this car. You have an experience you can compare to the current car you have and the flat tire you had once that you couldn't figure out how to fix. And so your confidence is boosted because Google is pushing you over there. Many leaders say, why would Google be doing that? Where the marketing side is loaded with content about the product. Yeah, but it's not loaded with relevant content. So when you ask a question about a product, it's not usually, what are the 3 value propositions that the marketing department is? That's not what they do. If that was their question, the marketing website should be the answer, right? But if the question is, how does the product work, or what does it cost, or how do I return it? It's probably a frequently asked question, or a question that somebody wants to ask occasionally that needs to be answered by documentation. And if we were to step it up a notch and recognize that the content can serve both the prospects and the existing customers, we would do it differently.
I think there's quite a bit to untangle from everything you've said. I think you've certainly painted an overarching context behind this idea of content. You said post-sales content. That leads me to believe that there is sales content. That leads me to believe that there's pre-sale, that there's marketing content. There's a bunch of areas where content touches it. Anytime that you need to disseminate information, there is some level of content. And there are 2 other things that I picked apart from the scenario you were painting. Context is important.
Yeah.
Legal mumbo jumbo doesn't mean a lick to somebody who has a 6th grade reading comprehension, or somebody that's scanning, somebody that's not interested in that. They
Or
don't want
somebody
to.
who's not a doctor. What's contraindication mean? I mean, I don't really know exactly. I could maybe figure out from etymology in college what contra, right, means. And then if I knew what indication means, I might be able to. But what if I'm wrong?
Yeah,
It could kill you, maybe.
let's find out. But
Exactly.
with the other side of that, there is emotions,
Yeah.
something that we don't like to really acknowledge in the cold black and white lines of a business model or a business plan, or a spreadsheet dictating revenue and expenses, is that all of these things are derived from people to people or people to machine to people interactions. you
Right.
know Information happens to uh, be created in order to influence some sort of behavior, and you want to help people solve problems. So you produce information, you produce products to also explain to people, here's how we can solve your problems. But if the people servicing that product or service, even if it's really useful, if you can't articulate a compelling reason or give a good experience as to why somebody should use it, they might use it and leave it. They might use it and have a negative experience and tell their friends, don't use that thing, or don't interact with that brand or that
Exactly. Exactly.
entity. So it's a pervasive
It's all
problem.
preventable damage to the brand. I'm sorry to overtalk you, but it's preventable damage to the brand. You don't have to have your brand messed up by prospective customers. Sure, you're not going to be able to answer every question all the time perfectly, but you can learn from those experiences and you can do better. One of the things that some companies are learning is about the changing nature of search. So, for example, there is a thing called a zero-click search. And that's where you go to Google, usually, you might use a different search engine, and you search for your question. And then the answer appears right there in the browser. You don't click. There's no click. Oh, marketing people do not like this because their KPIs are set up to count clicks. So if the answer is now on the page, the marketing person's like, wait a minute, how am I supposed to show and attribute our value to the company if we don't have clicks to measure? But the customer satisfaction manager doesn't give a shit about that. The customer satisfaction manager hears this. Let me get this right. Our customer asked a question about our product and they received the answer lickety split. And they didn't have to click on another website and then register and create a profile and then forget their password and have to go back and reset it again, right? All those other crazy things they have to do to get to the content. Instead, the content comes directly to them. And the reason why is because companies that use this thing called a unified content strategy, they're thinking about how can we deploy our content so that it is agile as possible and it can be delivered to the appropriate channel and personalized for the audience that it's actually going to encounter. And you brought up context. Context is also now increasingly part of this mix, because across the customer journey, when I'm upset about something and I'm searching for it. So if I get a flat tire on the interstate, I will tell you that I personally am going to predict that I will probably be upset. I am probably not elated or happy about having a flat tire. So I'm probably in a mood and I need that information, and you're dealing with somebody who's in the mood. So you don't want to talk to me in a happy tone. You want to say, oh, it sucks that your tire got flat, right? Let us help you fix it, right? And get right to the mix. But a lot of times the content that's produced is produced in the old way of thinking. We organize them by the department that creates them, for example. So we organize our content creation by department. The marketing department creates marketing content. The support people create support content. The technical writing people create technical writing content. The training people create training content. And yet we're training, we're teaching, we're solving problems, and we're supporting people who are all using the exact same product. And yet we describe them differently. We use different words. We sometimes even use outdated step-by-step procedures because they exist and someone finds it and they give it to somebody and it's the wrong one because we have more than one. So it's really about thinking through the discipline that's required to create, manage, and deliver your content and govern the rules around it so that you have the best chances of possible of delivering the right piece to the right person at the right time. And there's tons of technology behind this and lots of standards and methodologies that are important that we don't have time to talk about on the show in detail, but they're all mature. It's important to know that this is all doable today. It's not magic. It doesn't involve artificial intelligence in the way that we are talking about it in 2024, but it does rely on lots of concepts that artificial intelligence relies on. So there's a nice dovetailing of content production today and how AI can help us consume that content tomorrow.
I'm going to encapsulate that aspect of delivering the right piece of information at the right time to the right person so that they can get the right outcome into personalization. But better yet, hyper personalization, because personalization even can go further deeper into, you're not going to talk to me the same way if I'm a 16-year-old that just got a flat tire in the highway. Oh man, my parents are going to kill me. I don't know what to do. Right. Tell me step by step what I need to do. I've never done this before. Versus,
72-year-old.
Exactly. Don't tell me how to change a flat tire. I've been changing flat tires since.
That's right. I would say if you're 72, you're probably asking, can't you just send somebody out here to do this tire for me, right? And so you have to know your customer. But I think you're right. It is about all of that. There's also another component, which is thinking through the fact that the way that we write does not support the way people use content. So, for example, in software documentation, it was often in the 80s and 90s, it was also often popular to make a product, put it out, and put it on a disk that people could put in their computer, right? And they can install the software, except for there were different kinds of computers. So there were different kinds of software. So there was the same CD, the same recording technology, probably the same information, 90%, but it would say things like, if you're on a Mac, do this. But if you're on Windows, do that. Well, think about that. They had to do it that way because they didn't know who was using the information, so they included it all. Today we don't do that. We say, if you're on a Mac, do this. There's not going to be any Windows instructions in your instructions because we know you're not on a Windows machine, you're on a Macintosh. So what's the point of making you read through it? The point of making you read through it was never about you reading it through. It was about convenience for the author. The author was trying to write a topic about how to do something, and they were cognizant that you do it slightly different on the Mac than you do on the Windows. So they thought it would be useful to put it all in there. But in effect, what that means is that we start reading through the content and our brain starts thinking, why do they keep telling me about Windows? I'm on a Macintosh. Why do they, you know what I mean? And so it's cognitive friction that gets in the way of delivering the wrong information. Doesn't necessarily make them not successful. Maybe they could still figure it out, but they don't enjoy the experience because they're having to process a lot of information that's unnecessary to them.
I want to point that out as cognitive friction. I mean, if you go the opposite way and we have cognitive relief or psychological relief where you can accomplish your task faster, you reach a state of bliss or delightfulness faster. So you may become an advocate for that product due to your positive experience. But I just wanted to tie that off before we talk about the main topic. I think we've laid enough of a broad context around it. We're going to talk about the business use case for a unified content strategy.
Great.
The outcome being, because we're talking about benefits, not features, we're talking about the outcome, is being able to produce an omni-channel publishing capability. You know, a personalized way to share the right information at the right time to the right person for the right thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that word omni-channel also, we probably need to touch on just for a minute. And just for viewers that are listeners of the show, is when we say omni-channel, we are talking about more than one channel, but omni means more than that, right? It basically means all. And I think that might be an exaggeration. You're not actually going to be publishing to all channels, but what you're doing is you're making it more likely that you're prepared and capable to be able to deliver to a new channel when they pop up. And it's because we're separating the content from its formatting so that we can assign formatting at delivery, which we only know at delivery where we want to deliver it. We don't know when we're writing the content, oh, let's describe our new product. We don't know exactly where that information is going to go yet. But once you know, you need a capability to deliver it there. Are you going to post it on Facebook? Are you going to make a PDF? Are you making a sign at a conference? Is somebody going to read a script aloud? Is it a chatbot? What's delivering the content? And because of the way that we create content traditionally, we think that we're creating content for print. Even the web is based on it. Web pages, how many words are on a page, how many, how many sections are there of groupings of pages. We still use this kind of book mentality, but omni-channel is about breaking that mentality down and saying, books are made of pieces of content. Let's manage the pieces. And if you want to assemble the pieces into a book, great. But what if you want to assemble the pieces into a summary of the book and you only need some of the pieces? Then you can just drag and drop the pieces you need into the deliverable you want to make and tell the output format it's going to be a PDF, or it's going to be written aloud, or it's going to be a chatbot. And we can apply the rules at the time that you deliver.
Knowledge is a pure abstraction of facts, of information.
Yeah.
I mean, today, the way that we usually go about it is we write it on a piece of paper. We type it up on a Google document or whatever document, a spreadsheet. And then we have to then play this freaking hellish game where we have to convert and transmute and shift to post on Facebook, copy and paste this to Facebook, copy and paste this to Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever other social media, copy and paste, reformat to an email.
Right.
There's all these different games that we have to play to reshape the same information because we're changing it to a different vehicle.
Exactly. Because when we started as a book, and then there was no such thing as a chatbot when books were invented, right? And now we have chatbots, but we never planned for chatbots. And so the easy thing to do is let's just make the chatbot give them the same content that we already published. But people aren't saying, can you send me a PDF with all the answers to every question about your product? They're only asking one question. How do I fix this? How do I do that? How do I not do this? And that's all they want. They don't need or want you to give them everything. They want you to give them the attention that you would get from another human being. I mean, think about it. If I walked up to you, we were having a discussion, and I asked you a very specific question about this podcast, and you said, here, just read like the 100 things about my podcast thing. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. That's the answer. And there are people who do that shit today. And it's not an excellent customer experience. So if you say you value the customer and you want to provide an excellent customer experience, it behooves you to understand that there are better information management practices and tools and technologies available to help you. And I want to back up just a minute to the hyper-personalization comment that you made a minute ago. And I want to say that the unified content strategy that we're going to discuss today is not really designed to just like take you from A to Z, with Z being hyper-personalization. Hyper-personalization involves a lot more thinking and a lot more considerations. The simplest way to do it is to segment by product. So in the Macintosh versus Windows example is a great idea. I mean, a great example. One product, two flavors. Okay. You go to Target, you're going to look at kitchen appliances. And there's a KitchenAid company, I think. They make a blender, they make a toaster, they make an oven, they make different things. Some of their content will be similar because they're talking to the same audience. They're talking about the family of products, right? Whatever it's called, the chef product line or whatever, professional chefs. And they're speaking directly to those people. And they're going to repurpose some of that content from each group of people, regardless of if you're buying a toaster or not. But they're not going to tell you if you buy a blender how to use the toaster. You don't need to know that, right? And so we're really talking about personalization using simple modifications to your content to avoid giving people things that are not relevant to them by making the convenience for them instead of the convenience for you as the content creator.
Get rid of the noise. Get rid of the noise to just deliver the clear message. How do I clean the blender? Here's your answer.
Right.
How do I?
It doesn't guarantee it's a great experience, by the way. I want to be clear that doesn't guarantee that's a great experience, but it takes you one step closer, because if you remove the friction, then you stand a better chance of what's left should be just the relevant content, right? And then if you can find a way to deliver just that piece when they need it, in the language they need it, at the time they need it, in the format they need it. And by the way, here's the killer, on the device that they choose to consume it on, which may be more than one device. So to back up to our omni-channel discussion a second ago, the omni-channel is also about understanding that people themselves use multiple devices in one transaction. So they may start watching a video on TikTok or somewhere, and they learn about your product. So there's awareness. Then they search for your product. Now they're in a search engine. Maybe they're on their computer. Then they get called away and they need to go someplace. So they have their phone, and then they get a text message from that company, and now they're interacting on their phone. So they were on the television when they learned about it, then the computer later, then the phone. They've got 3 screens, and they're still in the same transaction with you. They just became aware of you. They may have some interest in you, and now you have an opportunity to talk and engage with them. But not if you don't understand how to deliver content experiences on all those devices. And setting up a separate team for every one of those, like, oh, everybody, we're going to create a whole team for people to make a chatbot, and another team for people that read stuff on the computer. It would not be scalable, right? It would be way too big. There'd be too many people, it'd be bloated. So what we really need is to orchestrate a way to make the content and apply the style and the rules to the content at the end that are appropriate for the device that it's going to be consumed on, so that, you know, you've seen it where it doesn't work right. You turn your phone and it doesn't turn, you know, or whatever, like whatever you expect it to do, or the text goes off the page and you can't reach it, you can't get to it because of the way it was designed. That's because it was designed as a page, and then they just pushed it out to all these channels. They never really thought about the fact that during delivery there needs to be some tweaks to that information so that it gives the experience the person desires.
I appreciate you breaking apart all these intermediary steps, from pure knowledge to the messaging to the vehicle where it's encapsulated and how it's delivered to the end person. You know, I do want to say that even though we're talking about this topic, it's thanks to technological advancements that we're able to have this conversation.
Exactly.
Because we can't really blame people that gave a book in an encapsulated format, because all we had was physical imprints of ink.
Yeah.
You know? And then later we got bulky computers that took up a whole room, and then we got smaller computers and smaller computers up until we got phones with no screens, phones with screens, phones capable of browsing the internet. I mean,
right.
It's been a
phones
steady...
Those that you can type on. Who knew that would even be a thing?
Yeah. And no keyboard phones that you could type on. Next evolution. We're in a constant evolution of things, and it's such an abstract notion that we detach knowledge from the message and the message from the delivery, that I think that's part of the reason why it's a bit of a mental exercise to understand this, you know. So let's explore this from the area of a problem or opportunity. The problem is you have knowledge that is siloed, fragmented, constructed from multiple areas, kind of jumbled up together in a blender and tossed to the end consumer. Here it is in the box. Read the manual. If you didn't read the manual, well, I can't do anything about it, you know? Call customer service. Did you read the manual? What exact problem do you have? I mean, that is the problem, right? Fragmentation and obfuscation of information.
Yes. Yeah, and I think, you know, when you think about a unified content strategy, for the viewers who don't know what it is, let me tell you that it is an approach. So it's not anything more than that. It's just an approach to content management that I want to say seeks to systematically give you the tools to plan, create, publish, and govern your content, with the goal to ensure that your content is always consistent, that it's relevant to the audience, right, contextually, and that it's accessible. And what I mean by that is that you can access it right across all different channels and platforms. And we want it to be accessible too to people who have disabilities. But those are all things that need to be built into your unified content strategy. In the end, the goal is to ensure that that consistency and relevance and accessible nature of the content provides that better experience by, you know, making sure the content is not inconsistent. There's nothing great about a customer experience if you can't figure out the content because it's inconsistent, right? You want that consistency. And so if you adopt a unified content strategy, the methodology that you use will help ensure that if the content is wrong in one place, it will be wrong everywhere. And if you flip it around, it means if it's going to be right in one place, it will be right everywhere that it's repurposed, because we're no longer copying and pasting. So the unified content strategy is really a systematic approach to reusing content. So that means that we build rules in our systems, and we teach the system what that piece of content is, and we give it a label. It has its own name, like a product description. So we don't describe how it looks. We're not talking about text, body text, headline, H1, H2, bulleted list. Those are formatting. We are adding semantics to the content. This is a product description, and it belongs to the product, the Cuisinart, right? And it belongs to the professional grade Cuisinart family. So we can now say there's relationships between the Cuisinart content and the professional Cuisinart category, right? And there are different pieces of content that that person would need to know because they're all related. And our systems remember the relationships so that they can pull the right content in at the right time and assemble it on demand when you need it. And that unified content strategy is a thing that technical documentation professionals have been doing for about 20 years now, in the software industry especially, because software products were built, you know, for one particular purpose. Hey, we think we can solve a problem. Let's build a software tool and see if people will buy it. And if things go as planned, they sell some, and then they say, let's sell in Canada too. Let's try to sell in France. And before long, they're growing, right? They have new requirements. They have new audiences. They have new context. They have new languages, new characters, new phrases, new rules, regulations, and laws, new customs. So think about all of that has to be somehow encapsulated into the content. And you can't hire just more people to write more content. You need to be smarter about it. And the unified content strategy allows you to do that.
I think you gave a really good example there. You don't want to copy and paste and have it mutate into some other faction, and then, you know, if you want it to be right always or wrong always, because then if it's right or wrong, you can go and rectify it, but you only have to go rectify the one copy
in one place.
The hellhole comes in place when, oh wait, did you change the one for the website? What about the one that we published? What about the one for the mobile app? Are you kidding me? I mean,
it's easy, by the way. I'm not trying to say that this is a magically fix a company's problems like this overnight. It is a methodical thing. You have to think through the problem. You have to govern the rules. You have to make sure people cooperate. You have to give them the ability to be successful, right? You can't just leave it to people. For example, somebody will probably argue, oh, well, that's what a style guide is for. No, it's not. A style guide is the container into which a bunch of rules are shoved. The style guide does not enforce any rules. So what good is it? If it sits on the LAN and you read it, good for you, but did you incorporate the rules on the fly? What if the style guide has 1,000 different rules in it? Are you really seriously telling me that you can manage 1,000 rules in your head and while you're writing, you can just avoid breaking any of them? That's nonsense. What we need is the rules encapsulated into the tools so that the content that makes it to the end, right, is closer to being ready. And it's got everything that it needs and is going to be appropriate to be delivered to the consumer. And for the company that I help represent, Hereto, they are a content management system company. They create a thing called a component content management system. Why is that important? Because most content management systems manage pages. They either manage documents as document management systems. So older content management systems were referred to as document management systems because they were managing pages. Then we have web content management systems. Those are just pages on the web. We even call them web pages, right? We didn't even change the damn name. It's still the same concept. We're just thinking like a book. And yet books are full of sections and chapters, right? Chapters are big, sections are smaller. What's smaller than a section? A paragraph. Okay, now we went from semantics to non-semantic. A paragraph is what it looks like, right? It's the shape of a thing, right? It's like it's just some bold text or some body text. That's what you call it, body text. But what if I said that was a product description? And then everywhere that I want to use the product description, I could repurpose the product description automatically because the product description has a label. It says this is not just body text, this is the product description. And then we add attributes to the label. It's the product description for the Cuisinart. Oh, but which Cuisinart model? There's more than one. Oh, for the professional model. And so as you start to stack these pieces of information and attach it to the content, which we call metadata, the systems that we manage them in, the component content management systems, manage the pieces or the components of content. Then we build recipes for each of the outputs that we want. And so the system knows in order to produce this recipe, we need these ingredients, just like you would in a kitchen. And if you go to make a bowl of cereal and it requires milk and you don't have milk, You don't have a bowl of cereal, right? You have a bowl with no cereal milk. So the point here is, if you wanted to make a web page, you could pull in the product description automatically and the product picture and other things because they already exist. There's no need to copy and paste them. We're just pulling them in by reference, which is called, in computer language, is called transclusion. We call it systematic reuse. The tool, though, is also important. I was going to say that tool is important to think about, though. The component content management system itself is based on the granularity that we need to deliver to the person that you're talking about, who contextually has a different situation than me. So the 16-year-old who has the flat tire versus the 72-year-old should get slightly different information. The person that uses the Macintosh versus the person that uses the Windows should get different information. And because they're componentized in a component content management system, you can build rules to say show me which pieces or components that are appropriate for this deliverable, and then don't show me the other one. So it's by default pushing the stuff that's not relevant out of the way and allowing you to kind of build quicker content, more scalable and automatable.
The opportunity here in pursuing a unified content strategy is to be able to construct things in a safe environment with multiple actors, with some guardrails built into the system, the tooling, whatever it is, and ensure that you can designate and kind of construct with atoms and molecules and you know, whatever other parallel you want to draw. You said recipes. You can instruct what kind of recipes are outputted in which devices, so you have one unified experience at the end of the day, and there's no upkeep. There's no mental tax on, did I put that thing there? No, it's all constructed in this way. If we expand the line, every time we expand the new product, it'll just be extended.
If you think about it, if you take that example that you've given one step further, so you have a bunch of people contributing content about a product line, right? So we're documenting some products, we're trying to make it successful so everybody can use the products that we make. So you have to think about the fact that those little components get weaved together in accordance with the needs of the person who's trying to use the product. And so the more granular that you get, the more personalized you can get. So this is kind of a paradox. So my friend Val Swisher wrote a book on personalization, in which she argues that in order to deliver Joaquin a individualized experience, we have to standardize the content. People hear that and they go, what? That breaks my brain. How can a bunch of standardized content, which I think they think means the same, how could that be unique to me? And what she's saying is, by standardizing and agreeing that this is the product description, this is the value proposition for that kind of person, you can then say, when you see that kind of person, deliver that kind of content, right? And the more molecular or smaller that you get to a point, you can manage more granular delivery, right? Because if I can break it down very small, I can start at the top. This is the product, but this is your particular problem. And because I know you speak French, it's in French. And because I know you have a Mac, here's the Mac stuff. And because I know you're a director of security, here's the stuff the director of security really needs to care about. Instead of making you read through all the things that the product does and then pick them out yourself. So a unified content strategy is about being able to bring it all together in one place, getting consistency across all those channels, improving the customer experience, having efficiency in content management, maybe getting to market faster because you don't have to spend as much time making the content, enhancing your search and your findability. It even reduces or mitigates risk in some situations and can lead to better customer satisfaction. And of course, the big reason that people do it is scalability, because it is more scalable to repurpose the content than it is to have people rewrite it over and over again. The other thing is that the ROI of a unified content strategy and the investment in a component content management system can often be offset by the savings for international organizations who translate their content, because what you do to the content upstream impacts the ability of the translation firm to translate your content. And with them using more AI and more machine learning, increasingly over the last 10 years or so, and now relying heavily on it, That means that if we semantically enhance the words that we create and we tell the system, hey, I'm using the word magnolia, I'm not talking about the flower or the tree or the person. I'm talking about Magnolia Street. And I'm not talking about Magnolia Street everywhere. I'm talking about Magnolia Street in Indianapolis, Indiana, right? A certain place. Then the system knows that information. And with artificial intelligence, it can use that to even further fine tune things. And so I think we're going to really see the unified content strategy in structured content, which is what we feed into it. So it's important for your audience to know that the content that you make today is unstructured. It is not semantically enhanced. It is decorated for viewing pleasure. And what I mean by that is that you made a word bold. Your marketing team wants you to smash two words together and put a trademark sign there. That's not useful. It doesn't help the user at all. These are all just decorations that we're putting on the content, but we're not enhancing it in a way that makes the machine understand it. So in a unified content strategy, we're producing machine processable or understandable content that the machine can then act upon our orders and help us deliver better experiences.
I think we're, again, touching on a topic that might be a little bit abstract because what people have been able to interact so far is just word processors and notebooks, you know? They don't understand that you can detach that from the visual representation.
Yeah, it's hard. That lesson itself is hard unless you're doing the job. I think once you do it and then you have to do it the hard way and then you do it a different way, you're like, oh, that's why we do it that way.
Even that concept of automation, you know, like individual components being mashed together to create molecules and compounds. I think that's a foreign concept because people are used to dumping their brain in a continuous stream of mass, you know.
We were taught to write in the narrative, even like grade school. And if you think about it, even as an adult, if you were in an automobile accident or a witness to a crime, the police officer would probably first try to calm you down because you're probably excited about what happened. And they would say something like, slow down, start at the beginning and walk all the way through. But that's because their intent is different, right? I don't need you to start at the beginning and walk me all the way through everything all the time.
Yeah, I don't need a whole story for you to tell me how this blender works.
But if I'm new, if I'm brand new and you know it, then maybe that's an opportunity for you to school me. And if I say I don't need to know that, I should be able to skip it and go on to something else. And you've seen that on streaming services. They try to educate you with a commercial, and after a certain amount of time, they allow you to skip over it because you may not want that or need that information. And we need to think about our content in the same way that streaming platforms do. Think about Netflix. When you go through the Netflix experience and you watch a show and then you're interrupted and you stop the show and you leave, you can come back a week later and Netflix will remember where you stopped. Why are we not doing this with our content? Why are we not leaving, allowing people to build a portal, have their own portal where they save all the information about the products that we make? We make the information. We can make a little library for them where they could store that. And think about this. If you were a customer support agent and you worked in a company and you could save and build your own little repository that you could share with other customer service agents based on the documentation that you have found because you were searching and you found it, and you know how difficult it is for other people to find it, you wanted to be helpful, you could build your own little library, and these components would allow you to do it because they're individual pieces. It's not just a big, PDF full of 1,000 answers.
The right content, the right piece of information provided to the right person at the right time for them to take the right action.
Exactly. And the right tools. So if you have a component content management system and you create components of content, now you need to do them both. You can't just buy a component content management system and expect your content to magically be modularized, right? You have to invest in thinking it through and breaking it down into topics. But once you do that, the exercise becomes very intellectual and obvious. After you've solved a few small problems, which is what most companies do, they take a small subset of their content and they work on it and they go, what if we did this? Could we do it? And so if we did that, we would adopt a component content management system, which would allow us to do something that we can't normally do, which is to reuse content, right, across different documents or platforms without duplicating any effort. And we're ensuring the consistency, as you pointed out, but we're also reducing the time that it takes to create the content or to update the content or correct the content. And if we're promoting multiple language content, then we're going to provide that content to the translators. And because we've enhanced it with semantics, the translator may run across a word. Here's a great example. The country Poland, the people in Poland speak a language known as Polish. I also have a word that is identical, furniture polish. So I polish my furniture. So without semantics, polish and Polish are the same thing aside from the capital letter. And we know humans don't type correctly all the time. So, you know, you can't rely on text case, right, to say that Polish is different than Polish. An English teacher would tell you that, but the computer doesn't always see it that way. And it may inadvertently give you information on something that's not germane.
We're talking about the unified content strategy. Strategy is something that is decided in the top brass at the C-suite. It has to be a decision from the decision makers in an organization. We're talking about the tooling, the methodology, but what is the outcome that we want to achieve, and what is the ROI? The outcome we want to achieve is a superior customer experience, because we don't want to waste their time. We don't want them to have to go through more hoops, more friction points to achieve the objective that they want to achieve. They want the right information at the right time. We want them to convert faster as customers.
Yeah.
And even if they are customers, if they encounter further problems with our products or services, we want them to be resolved as quickly as possible for both their mutual benefit.
We don't want them to churn.
No, and I don't want to spend more money than I have to on customer support. Customer support will be a big bloat if I have a if I have a poorly designed product, or I didn't take into consideration certain information needs, certain product uses. I mean, that would be the reason why downstream I would get more customer support calls. You know, I don't know how to use the toaster. Well, you know, you got to twist this knob and do that thing. Well, why wasn't it in the instruction manual? It's a thing we forgot to add on.
Right.
You know,
well, and that begs the question right there. It is possible and it is probable that we will forget some stuff. We're humans and we're just going to make mistakes. So we're going to make mistakes. But the support people who answer the phone are not the people who create the content. So that silo sometimes doesn't have a communication channel back to technical documentation. But what if you're sitting in support and you realize, oh, look, we keep getting calls about this one thing and we try to find the information and there doesn't appear to be anything on the website that's that valuable that answers that question. So the support people create their own answer to help that customer because that's their job, to help the customer. And then sometimes they share that answer with other support agents so that if they come up with the same question, they'll have an answer for it. But keep in mind, that answer is only now in the support department on somebody's computer. It's not in the documentation. So it's constantly, there's no feedback loop.
Yeah.
A unified content strategy encourages a feedback loop too, so that you can make constant iterations.
Global feedback loop, not a localized feedback loop.
You got it. And then the whole language thing. So think about this. Copying and pasting is challenging because humans cannot remember where we copied and pasted things. And so later, something will change. And you will have to say, oh, I should probably go back to our website and change this. Oh, and I got a brochure that we did last year. I'll change it over there and I'll change it over here. But you probably are going to forget one or two places, or somebody else has repurposed it and you didn't know. And they copied and pasted it someplace else. And now that content is out of your control. So a unified content strategy can help regulated industries in particular kind of keep control of that by having one product description that exists in one place and it's displayed in multiple places, but it's never copied and pasted. It's like pulled in from the source. So if the source changes, all of the output channels, except for print, because once you commit to print, you can't really unprint that, but all the output channels will change. And that's a super important benefit. But one benefit that is overlooked is there's a huge ROI to content reuse. So if it costs you, let's say $100 to write a product description, and you're going to translate that product description into 10 different languages, and you're going to use the product descriptions in 17 different deliverables in America and 22 in France and 11 in Canada, do the math. That piece of content is that you only paid $100 for is being repurposed over and over again, and you're only going to translate it once. That's not normally what happens today. Somebody will send the website content to be translated. Half the words are the same words that are in the brochure. Then they send the brochure to be translated. And you know what? The translation companies are happy to translate all that for you and charge you. But there's a thing called translation memory. And if you have a unified content strategy and a component content management system, and you're global in nature and you have multiple languages, you want to adopt a terminology and a translation management system to attach onto it to help your translators do the work that they need to do to your content before it's delivered. And often the savings from translation can be used to pay for the investment in the content creation and the component content management system, because translation is so important and expensive, and localizing it to make sure it's appropriate can be taxing. So if you invest in this, you're going to see multiple benefits across the organization, not just in the one department. And I wanted to say just really quickly about what you said, that leadership needs to be involved in the decision-making for the technology. I have found that that is not normally true. What I have found is that leadership is unaware that this technology exists, and that they probably place the responsibility on their department managers to determine what would be appropriate for their departments. But often department managers, especially in technical documentation, are not equipped with the management or the ROI argument skills, because we weren't trained to sell the value of something. We were trained to describe how something works. So we weren't there to convince you to use it. We were there to explain how it works. And so if you have a technical documentation manager who now knows we want to provide a better customer experience, they may be exposed to people like me and others and hear the message and go, we should totally do that. But they're not always good at communicating to leadership why they need to do that. And they're not always able to have their idea compete against all the other ideas that are being pitched to leadership. So the top leadership is hearing you and you're like, this is a no-brainer. We're going to save money. It's going to be better. But what you don't know is that there's somebody else who's saving more money. Their idea is way bigger. And it's also directly connected to what the executives care about. So one of the things I advise is that before you go and argue that you should change your publishing process, you should find out what the leaders currently care about. In a publicly traded company, this is super easy because they publish a thing called the annual report. And the annual report is a government regulated document that needs to have certain stuff in it to fulfill the regulations. But then the marketing department usually takes the report and they glamorize it, and they put interviews in there, and they put pictures of the leaders, and the leaders make promises to the shareholders for next year. If you invest in our company, we will take this money and we will help, we will try to scale our production so we can grow our company and do better work. And so if you know that they promised to scale and they're promising shareholders who invest money, then your project should say, I can help you scale. Because you know they want to do that. So you can't go in with the content. You can't go on with the content argument that'll make our content better. They don't care. They don't give a shit. It's not if it was something they cared about, this wouldn't be a problem and we wouldn't have to talk about it. But it isn't something they care about.
We can even broaden this phenomenon to anybody in the technology or information sector, that when you try to push a tool just for the sake of technology or capabilities, you're leaving on the table what business really cares about. And that's only 3 levers. Will this cut down on costs? Will this increase our revenues? Or would this allow us to provide a higher customer experience to more people? Yeah. If you can address any of those 3 levers, in addition to tackling the capabilities, that makes a more compelling case.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And the capability word is important too, because if you think about it, this is not my idea. It dawned on me in a conference where a bunch of smart people were around me and I somehow conjured it up with, overhearing them. But that leadership doesn't buy features and benefits. Leaders buy abilities. And that's the suffix of capability, findability, accessibility, printability, scannability, optimizability, interoperability. That's what they buy. They do not buy the other stuff. So stop trying to sell them stuff that you want, because what you want to sell them is what they get at the end. They get the capability to be ready for the next channel. They get the capability to deliver to all the 6 channels that we want to support today. They get the capability of doing it affordably. They get the capability of doing it, in a way that is scalable. And so if you start to frame your argument that way, you can eventually get them to open up and maybe learn to understand why you might need a component content management system, why you might need to alter the way you publish content. Otherwise, they think it's a people problem. They think it's the writers are just not doing it right. It's like, no, the writers, first of all, the writers only write like 20% of their time. 80% of their time, as you know, is trying to figure out what the problem is, interview the experts that know the answers, translate that into some kind of normal speak that other human beings will understand, and then do all of the necessary work in order to produce that content.
And this is not a new problem. It's not going to be an old problem. It's a problem as old as time, and that we have to resolve sooner rather than later. I think, we're making some improvements here with people adopting knowledge representation, knowledge modeling methodologies, and things like that. There are tools that exist, as Scott mentioned, but we fundamentally have to understand that we live in a dynamic, complex world that has many different perspectives overlapping in the same scenario, and we need to pay mind to each of those scenarios, not just through personas, but through some sort of modular system of dispersing that information.
Yeah, and I think if you think of the web as the enabler, right? Because a lot of the content that is produced and consumed is based on the web, or is going to be destined for the web or consumed on the web. We could think about, what if we just got smarter about the way we publish? So what if, instead of allowing one team of your department in your company to produce a website, and then another one to produce a different kind of website, and another one a knowledge center, and another one a training thing, and it just gets crazy. Consumers don't want to jump from site to site and then remember another password, and the single login thing doesn't always work. I mean, it's a hot mess, really. And so if we just thought about it and we looked strategically at our content and honestly at it, I think we would find room for improvement. And then we just prioritize the things that are most important to us. Software as a service companies, they struggle all the time because they often start with a startup mentality, right? They have no budget, they're zooming along, and they have a goal. Maybe the goal is to get 10,000 people to download the free version of the software and see if they can convert some of them. And then along comes growth. They get better, they get bigger, and they start asking for money. And then they ask for money, and all the stuff that they do as a startup, not going to be supported by the new investors. The new investors want them to be able to scale. And because they took an ad hoc way of creating content, which seemed appropriate for a startup, but once you ask for $35 million, you're no longer a startup. You're just in startup mode, but you're starting to be responsible for other people. You have to prove your value, right? You have to show that you're making progress. You can't just continue to throw content at it any old way. And there's a lot of this mediocre content production going on in the world today, and it passes for good enough. Pharmaceutical, guess what? Not good enough because you could die. Airplanes, not good enough, you could die. Anything that'll kill you, that won't be good enough, right? You can't have accidental, like, oh, sorry, we made a mistake on the content, it killed some people, right?
Yeah.
But if you are in a software company and your software is not going to help kill anybody, then maybe you don't feel that pressure. Or if you're in a software industry and you're not regulated. If you're in the software industry and you're in finance, you're regulated. Insurance, you're regulated. Equipment manufacturing, you're regulated. Healthcare, you're regulated. See what I mean? The regulations kind of set the guardrails, and it means that they're used to being constrained. And I think that the more that we understand that the constraints are there to help us do better work and to avoid, doing a whole bunch of stuff that is not valuable.
It also reduces the cognitive load and the scope of work. And that's important for us to be able to increase our throughput and have less stress. So I think the guardrails are part of a productive environment.
And your show touches on AI, right, a lot. And so one of the things that's important to note is that the kind of content that technical writers create is called structured content. We often write this content in a markup language called XML. There's a flavor of XML called the Darwin Information Typing Architecture. And it is an open standard that we write to that represents one topic. And basically, it's the recipe for whatever a human needs to know in order to do a task, any task. And then we follow the same structure all the time. And the machines in the software we use, they understand that structure, and they know what those pieces of content are, and they know why we are creating them in the way that they are created. So they can help us better move them around. They can help us adapt that content. They can help us personalize that content. They can help us deliver that content in different ways. Because we've managed to modularize it and separate the content from its formatting, it means that we can apply the formatting at the end. So there's no, we have to go backwards and change it because we never did anything to it. It's just the content itself. And then later we apply the style. We're really just after what is the meaning of the content? What is this content? How do we help machines move it around?
That's another layer of complexity you're bringing up, and another benefit of having everything be pulled apart and have a unified content strategy, gluing things together, styling and the messaging. What if you change your color? What if you change your font? What if you change the tone of voice? What if you want to modify representation in any way to any channel? Every channel has specific configurations for that.
Exactly. And a great example of what you've just said is a merger or an acquisition.
That's another hellhole.
Right. So, but it's the same one if you think about it. I'll explain. So your company is successful and you have a little extra cash from investors and you're going to acquire some company that'll do something useful for you. So you acquire them and now you have all their documentation and all their support content, but now you own it and you need to put it in your help center and you need to change the logo and you need to change the name. Oh, good luck. Have a good time because, you know, they did that with some, you know, rudimentary skills and some tools that weren't optimized for that. And they copied and pasted a lot of stuff in there. So you're going to be keyword searching forever. You're going to try to find every instance of the brand name and change it. And if the brand name is similar to a real word, you're going to accidentally change real words at the same time. And you'll probably miss some of them. But what if you created what we call an entity, or what if we created a word that was your product and that's a component? And every time we use that, we insert it, right? So we don't type it, we insert it in there. And then if we change it, it changes everywhere because we've inserted it and we've reused the inserted piece of content. We didn't copy and paste it, we inserted it, right? So that's called transclusion, where you take something from one place and you put it in another place and it's identical. It's because it's the exact same thing.
Now we're playing with digital Lego blocks.
Kind of. I mean, I think one thing that's missing from that is the Lego example is that these are connected pieces of content. So they're live. And what I mean by that is if you were to have a spreadsheet and you were tallying up January's bills and it totaled at the bottom, you would want to take that total and move it to the spreadsheet that's on another page called February. And you would want that the last number on the January to be the first number on the February spreadsheet, right? But you don't want to copy and paste it or type it in there because you might make an error and it's not connected to that previous spreadsheet. So if you're in January and you change some of the numbers, the total at the bottom will change. And so will the total on the next page because you're referencing the exact same cell. It's not a copy and paste. It's a copy of the exact same thing, but it's live. So that means if I change it on the spreadsheet number one, it changes on spreadsheet number two because they're connected. There's no reason for me to copy and paste. So that's another example of systematic reuse.
Well, Scott, I think you know, we can reduce labor, we can increase reusability. If it's more relevant, people are going to have better experiences, so we're going to increase revenue. You're going to be able to satisfy more customers in different areas through different language and tone of delivery. I think we made the business case for a unified content strategy. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot more to it. And for people who want to deep dive, there's a book called Managing Enterprise Content, a Unified Content Strategy. And that book was published originally around 2000. There was a second edition published, I want to say around 2014. It's still relevant today. It doesn't name drop technology because it's not about tools. It's about the approach and the standards and the things that you need to do in order to make this kind of system work. This methodology is in place in corporations around the world. It is not, however, globally in each company. So it may be that one division of your company uses a unified content strategy and they're attempting to unify the content, but meanwhile, another division of your company is like in the wild, wild west doing something totally different. So the word enterprise is really challenging for us to use, even though we would like to imagine that enterprises could get their act together as a whole unit. But I think the reality is it's piecemeal. And so your journey will probably start in one area and spread out over time into other departments. It won't be a universal thing. So don't fear that you have to change the whole entire company at one time in order to adopt this. You can actually start small and move across different silos and you know, bring them in as you can.
Another component that another piece of information I'm gonna add to what you're saying is, the bigger the organization, the longer it's gonna take for it to change. So
Correct.
be ready to fight the good fight, and if you want to adopt, you can adopt in a smaller scope, maybe in a team or a department, and
Correct.
scale and propagate as required. But
And iterate, right? Iterate. Make your mistakes there because you'll learn those lessons that you can apply later. And then be smart. And before you want to bring other people in, let them see what you're doing and show them what you're doing and why you're doing. Don't try to convince them first, because that doesn't usually work. They're like, wait a minute. Why is that Scott guy in our turf and telling us what to do? Don't do
you got to
that. Just say, I want to show you what we're doing because I need some feedback on it. Just, you know, get them engaged in some way where it's not about them changing. And you may see an aha moment that's volunteered. They may just say, oh my gosh, we totally need that. And that's so much easier to convince somebody who already wants it.
Thank you very much, Scott. I think I've learned a thing or two from you, and I'm gonna keep an eye out for what's next to come in your, in your path, whatever it is that you're creating next.
Awesome. And I'd love to introduce you to a couple of AI experts that are in the technical documentation sphere that might be interesting for you to talk to. And if you'd like me to do that, just let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.